Welcome along to another episode of Irreverent. I'm the Reverend Jamie Franklin, and this week the jolly old giant, Reverend Thomas Pelham, is not with us, but I'm happy to say that the Reverend Daniel French indeed is. Daniel, how are you this day?
Doing really well at the moment. It's parish life is going well, and loads of holiday makers in.
Oh, yeah.
Still, and I've got a number of people in our intern program who have arrived for short breaks. We've got a guy from Texas who's here for 2 months,
Very cool.
a young theologian, and then we've got an ordinand, Steve McGregor, who I think is a friend of Clinton.
A friend of mine as well, Daniel. Friend of mine.
Yes. So Steve's here for 4 weeks. And we've got Christoph coming in a week or so's time. I've got a godson who's about to be ordained, who's coming for weekends. So
wow.
We've got a real sort of, in fact, when we've had compling, it's been really nice to actually have the average age of the congregation radically down. They brought families and what have you. So there's a real nice buzz actually.
Steve asked me when I saw him in Cambridge. He asked me what he should do when he comes down. What kind of experiences would be valuable with you? And I said to go to any funerals or funeral visits, or basically any massive kind of life events like that. Because when I was not ordained, those were the things I found most helpful. Sort of stuff to do with like end of life or really sort of serious things in people's lives. So just to warn you, I've told him to look out for that.
No, that's fine. We could do that. We've got weddings coming up. We've got some outdoor funerals. As well booked up. So that there's lots of that. There's lots of civic-y stuff around here as well. That's also quite pertinent and interesting to see. And we gave them a whiz tour this morning of some of our administrative office, and a sense of how a lot of the sort of things that go in a vicar's in tray. That how I think he sort of picks up on this that you can do all the fantastic, and you need to do all the fantastic theology at seminary, at theological college, but when you come into the curacy or incumbency. When you come to the captain of parish, you land with a thump with all the practical stuff, don't you?
The
drains and disability ramps and the parish infighting, the committee meetings, the bridezillas, all that. You've got to kind of deal with all the sort of the stuff of human life, and it's good to do that.
It's like Nehemiah building the wall with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. I'm not sure what represents what. Probably the trowel represents the admin, and the sword represents the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Something like that. Anyway, I'm not sure if that metaphor quite works, but that sounds very good, Daniel. All sorts of stuff going on down there. I'm doing okay. I suppose it's got some stuff, interesting stuff going on here. I do another podcast as well as this one called Holy C of E, where we talk about what it means to be a Catholic Christian in the Church of England. I do that with Clinton, who's at Cambridge, and that's how I know Steve through Clinton. But anyway, that podcast is quite interesting because, well, I find it interesting anyway, because we talk, more specifically about kind of theological stuff, which I couldn't talk about with Tom because he would bring all his reformed viewpoints into it and really kind of mess around with my thing. But anyway, this show is about current affairs in faith, I think. Anyway, it's supposed to be. So I suppose we should talk about any sort of news. I don't really think there's very much that's been happening, is there? I mean, I wrote some stuff down. There was obviously the G7 conference, which was in Cornwall, which I guess wasn't that close to you, was it? But it's kind of down your end of the country.
It's one of those things actually. Listeners may be aware of the Cornwall Devon thing. It's like this Yorkshire Lancashire thing. So I think there was a lot of Devonians who were sort of like having a sigh of relief that it wasn't on their patch.
I can imagine. I wouldn't want those people on my patch either.
And so, you know, I only heard it sort of oblique. I did have someone who rather bizarrely said to me, "Are you going to the G7?" And I said, "No, I'm not invited," strangely, you know.
Are they confused about who you are?
Yes.
You're confused about your role. I mean, you're a very important person, Daniel, but
you know, I might be going around there selling pasties or something, but that's
mask. Well, have you seen all those photos of them at the barbecue where they're all kind of like hugging each other in a big sort of in a big scrum, and they're all these serfs with beef burgers and masks kind of cowering next to them. It's very, very bizarre. Very bizarre.
It is, yeah, it is. It's that's it. Well, there's a whole podcast just in that, isn't there?
Well, there is this kind of thing now where it does seem like the kind of elites are and probably have been for a while, showing contempt for their own rules. I mean, we've obviously had historic instances of this. I mean, the most high-profile one is Neil Ferguson, isn't it? But we've had this thing with the G7. And then also other stuff like Royal Ascot. I don't know whether you saw that. They were, you know, there was a huge gathering of people, way over 30 people, all sorts of stuff going on there. And then, of course, the I think it's the UEFA officials. This is a football thing, UEFA. They have been allowed to travel into our country, and they don't have to observe the quarantine rules. So, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? It just seems like sort of one rule for them and another rule for everyone else sometimes, really. I mean, are we being paranoid, Daniel? Do you think there's something going on here?
I also noticed on social media that some people, particularly on the more professional side of the music industry, were getting quite prickly about football. Now, here I am. I'm on territory that is a bit thin ice because I know very little about football, and my son, if he was here, would be teasing me at this point.
That's okay, Daniel. Between us,
but I'm going to try. And I
Yeah.
have to say, I had sympathy for football supporters going around singing and chanting, and where they were put, where these snippets, little videos of them singing in airports, you know, that there were these sort of rather sneering posts saying, "Oh, you know, look at this lot, and it's so out of tune, and shouldn't they? If they can do that, why can't we, you know, have our little quartet at Evensong or blah 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 blah?" Which I felt a certain sympathy actually for the football supporters, for goodness sake, you know, because on the whole, you know, you can imagine that most of these people, most of these guys, let's say, that, you know, they've been your postman, your Amazon delivery man, your we don't have milkmen anymore, you know.
Oh, we do. I've got a milkman. Daniel, I've got a milkman. I've got a milkman. I do. We get
very retro.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I'd recommend it. Anyway, I didn't mean to flow.
They've been the people at the cash front, you know, in supermarkets and so on. You know, I actually think that there was a bit of the spirituality of the prodigal's older brother in some of this. Look at these lots, you know, all these months I've not even, you know, strung a note, and yet these lot come in and they're singing, you know, was it Three Lions on a...
Three Lines, yeah. It's just called Three
Lines.
Yeah.
And they're singing it even badly. And I just thought, oh, yes, well, you know, while most of you have been working from home, and saying, you know, lockdown's been not so bad, actually, has it? I've rather enjoyed lockdown. Lockdown been environmentally brilliant. You know, blah, 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 blah. While my, you know, surf postman comes and delivers stuff, and how dare he not do so, you know.
How dare he go and sing a song?
There's something I have to be really careful at. And it to me, I thought, well, good on them. They wanted to have us sing out a tune in Gatwick Airport. So what?
Well, this whole ban on singing and music, Daniel, is something I'm against in general, obviously, because I'm a sensible person. But if I do say so myself, but the middle class contempt for the working class, it always comes around when we have football tournaments. And I don't know whether you remember, there's a fly in my office. There's a tiny crack in the window behind me, so maybe it will go out.
GCHQ.
This is a first for.
It's actually a mini drone.
This is a first for. It could be. This is a first for a reverend.
It's augmented.
Yeah, it's an augmented reality fly. No, so remember in 2018 when England were doing really well in the Russia World Cup, there was all this outcry in the Guardian and all those kind of Guardianista leftist papers because they didn't want the English team to win because it was around the time we were trying to negotiate the exit from Europe, Brexit, and they were saying things like, England cannot win the World Cup because if they think they will win the World Cup, if they win the World Cup, they'll think, oh, we can win Brexit too. So there's this whole these gammon-faced idiots, Brexit supporting, Daily Mail reading, it's always directed at English football fans. There's something about them that particularly ires the Guardianistas of this world. I mean, to be honest with you, though, then you've got this sort of further irony where the English team have decided to become sort of the ringleaders of the woke revolution now, and they. Watching a football match, as we've talked about before, is more like kind of watching some kind of weird party political broadcast, especially when you on ITV with the adverts. Then
what's with the adverts? What's the tell us about the adverts?
Well, so what you'll have is advert break every once in a while, and every other advert features the England football team in some form, promoting some kind of social activism, whether it's there's a mental health advert, which I have to say is really, really annoying and stupid, not because I'm against mental health, but because it's so vague and trendy that nobody who actually has any mental health problems would benefit from it. There's stuff like that, stuff around there's this really weird one around equality in football with sort of men kissing each other on the football field, and this small girl with kind of a turban on as the referee, and it really, I mean, just bizarre. And so there's stuff like that. Then there's other sort of anti-racist ones. It just goes on and on forever. And when you're watching it, you're just thinking, this is just annoying. I said I don't want to bore our listeners because I went on about this last week, but it's just irritating. It's just stop it, just please. Like,
we're giving you the football that we think you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that you necessarily want.
If the England football team are watching this, if Gareth Southgate is watching it, please just stop it. Just stop it and focus on the football. I really think the quality of the football should be the priority. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm unreasonable. I just want to watch football. I don't want this. So
I get the impression that Gareth Southgate, who I only really kind of know from that he wears rather snazzy waistcoats.
Not anymore.
Is he giving them up? Is he
he doesn't wear them now, maybe because it's too hot. But he was wearing them in 2018 in Russia.
Okay, he seems to have entered into the cult of Gary Lineker.
Yeah,
they're on the same. They've been watching the same brainwashing subliminal tapes.
They're in deep with the BBC, basically.
Maybe it's the Walker crisps or something.
The crisps have sent them mad. The crisps have sent them insane.
But they've got they're augmented.
There is something about English football in particular. I don't know what it is, because it's not the same with the Scottish or Welsh teams. They're much more kind of down to earth people. It's like the English team. I've spoken to quite a lot of fans about this as well. People in my church, like kind of salt in the earth type people, and they really they would normally be absolutely supportive 100%. They really dislike the current lot of England players, and I think it's because of this this political gesticulation all the time, which is, as I say, it's just irritating, and it's kind of, to be honest with you, this is going to make me sound unpopular. I mean, this is going to make me be unpopular if any football fans, English fans, are watching this. But I'd kind of like to see England lose just to teach them a lesson. And I think in their next match, which will be, I think, probably the day before we do the next one of these, they will have played Germany or France and lost. So we'll do a sporting update next week, shall we? And see how things go. The other thing, Tony, you shared with me this morning is that apparently the BBC are peddling some kind of conspiracy theories now about how there are other treatments apart from vaccines for COVID. I mean, how outrageous! I thought they were a truth-telling, reasonable fact-checking organisation, and now they're saying, what was it? Some crazy idea, like
it was some drug. I never heard of it. Ivermectin.
Yeah, I've written it down.
Is that a place somewhere? That must be a place in Wales or somewhere.
I think it's in northern Scotland. But it must have been named after that. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? This treatment, which is
apparently this. If you take this, it sort of lowers it lowers some of the more aggressive things of COVID. I don't know where they got that from.
It's absolutely insane. And they say as well, it's cheap, it's safe, it's effective, it's widely available. I mean, what kind of madness is this? We all know that the vaccine...
You've got to be so careful about selecting what news you listen to.
I know. Well, I'm calling...
Be discerning.
I'm calling for a total boycott on the BBC for peddling conspiracy theories around ivermectin. I'm pretty sure they've also given some credence to the absolutely ridiculous conspiracy theory that the COVID virus was created by human beings in a laboratory that just happens to be in the same city that it originated from.
It's extraordinary. I think they should be removed from YouTube.
Exactly. I mean, how stupid and crazy do you have to get suggesting that just because there's a research laboratory which specializes in developing coronaviruses from bats in the same city that the outbreak started, how crazy do you have to be to say, well, just because of all that circumstantial information, that means it came from the lab?
I mean, next they'll be saying that, they cut corners.
Yeah.
In that lab,
Yeah. Next, they'll be saying that research was funded by the National Institute of Health and Dr. Fauci in America, which we all know is just a conspiracy theory.
I know. Guys, just airbrush these thoughts out of your head.
He's just doing a great job, and he's totally honest.
Great guy. So saint, living saint. Living saint. I mean,
Honestly, don't tell me that Fauci is untrustworthy and that he's engaged in funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan, which has caused a global pandemic.
Have you got one of those Chris Whitty mugs, by the way?
I think this is one here. I'm looking at it now.
Apparently, they're really popular at the moment. Chris Whitty mugs.
Chris Whitty mugs. Where can you buy them from? Can you buy them from Amazon or?
I don't know. I have to have a look. Hasn't Valence become a bit of a sex symbol or something?
I haven't heard that.
I mean, these are obviously extraordinary people,
Yes. I've got one here, which I can share. Shall I share it on the old thing?
Yeah.
So let's have a look. So this one is on Amazon, and it's a nice drawing. Can you see this? It's a nice drawing of Whitty, and here we are. It's got him. It says "Next slide, please." That's nice. There were actually some ruder ones.
Well, we don't want. No.
We don't want rude. We don't want anyone being rude about Chris Whitty. I mean, that would be disgusting. Anyway, so that's that. So now everyone's seen my desktop as well, which I didn't.
That's amazing.
I apologise if there was any secret information on there.
I wonder if you can get them on Alibaba. Maybe you could,
What's Alibaba?
As wholesalers.
Yeah.
You could buy several hundred. They're probably made in China.
Oh yeah. There's one. There's some quite good mugs actually. There's. I've just seen a really funny one. All right. Okay. Hang on. I'll show you.
You're allowed to show it.
This is good. People
have to describe.
Are probably watching this thinking.
For those listening. No.
People are probably watching this thinking, these guys don't have anything to talk about this week. We do actually.
Only works on.
Can you see it?
Oh no.
Do you see it? JVT, and T is spelled TEA. So that's obviously Jonathan Van Tam on the side of a mug, and a JVT, which is called sometimes, and the T is actually TEA. So it's a clever
looks
pun.
Authoritative, doesn't he?
He looks very serious. He's been a protector.
I can just imagine him, in the presence of our Prime Minister. our elected, democratically elected prime minister.
Yes, he absolutely
represents
all
the
of us
people
perfectly.
Having to explain, I mean, having to listen to advice.
JVT is going to protect us all for the rest of our lives, and I could not be any more comforted by that thought. Hey, you know what? I actually thought, Daniel, I'm going to reread Brave New World. I just finished reading War and Peace, and I've got another novel to read, which I'm in the middle of, by a Catholic novelist called Randy Boyagoda, which I'm reading now. But next novel, I'm going to reread Brave New World, which I've read twice before, but not during a period of time when it's actually coming true. So have you read it recently?
Yeah, I read it about half a year ago.
And did it speak to you very deeply about the current situation?
Yeah, definitely. Christianity without tears.
Yeah. And there's the kind of technocratic element of it as well. I believe when, you know, sort of the technocratic philosophy was kind of coming into the ascendancy, Huxley knew about this, and he wrote it into Brave New World. So in Brave New World, there aren't any politicians. There are just scientists who run everything, which is, you know, kind of what's going on now, really, isn't it?
I mean, I think if folks haven't read it, it's a fairly short read, isn't it? It's 150, 200 pages.
Yeah.
It's very readable. There's a Netflix version out, but I don't know how authentic that is to.
Oh yeah, I've not seen that.
But whether it's been politically corrected, I don't know how you could politically correct Brave New World, but I'm sure Netflix could have a good go at that.
I'm sure there's not enough diversity in it, is there?
Yeah.
There needs to be diversity.
Yes, it's worth a read. And you know, there are other dystopias. I mean, I've mentioned a bit longer in volume, but The Hideous Strength is it is very pertinent at the moment.
Yeah.
Or even C.S. Lewis's shorter essay that The Abolition of Man is very good. Though the film version with Emma Watson and Tom Hanks is appalling, The Circle, which is by, I haven't got the, I've given my copy away. That is a new dystopian piece about social media ruling our lives. That has a lot of things to tell us. So
I'd like to read that actually, yeah.
Cheery reading, but you know, maybe.
I mean, of course, 1984 as well, which I think pertinent. I mean, I've read 1984 several times. I haven't reread it recently, but I think the stuff around language is particularly pertinent from 1984, the way that language is being manipulated in order to control people's perception of reality. That's going on all the time at the moment in really quite obvious ways. And then there's another book which influenced Orwell, which is called We, which is that's in W-E, by Yevgeny Zemyatin, who's a Russian novelist of the early 20th century. Yeah, it's very thin. It's easy read, probably only 100 pages, but it's an excellent book. And that kind of really is about, I guess it's about communism, really. It's about a kind of Marxist collectivist view of society. So all of these guys.
One of my interns was recommending Bradbury's Fahrenheit 5.1.
Yeah.
So that's very pertinent to the idea of us all living in sort of our own little cyberspaces.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and using the sort of, especially a video screen technology. So that one's very good about technology. I mean, I do think it's a really good novel. Its literary quality is not as high as Huxley or George Orwell or Zemyatin. It's kind of written in a sort of pulpy style, but still very much relevant. So there you go, listeners. Don't say we don't give you anything on this show. There's a reading list for you to get into.
Richard and Judy, Eat Your Heart Out. Our book is much better.
Dystopian Book Club of the Week. We can all get together and get
that could be our secret society, couldn't it? The dystopian clergy book club.
Underground dystopian clergy book club. I like it. Very niche, but also very pertinent, very relevant. which is how I like to think of the show in general. Hey, Daniel, let's do our scripture of the week.
Yes, yeah, we've got a good one. We've got a good one today.
Different approach this week. We're going to read about the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babel, as you might pronounce it. I pronounce it Babel. Do you say Babel or Babel, Daniel?
Babel, probably, but I've been around two Americans all week, so
they would say Babel. Babel. Yeah. Okay.
Not
right.
Bagel, Tower of Bagel.
Bagel. I stayed with an academic, philosopher for a while. Well, he wasn't really a philosopher, but anyway, he was really into Hegel, and he used to use any excuse to mention Hegel. And once at breakfast, he was eating this bagel. I won't finish that story. Anyway, so Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and few words, and as men migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the languages of the earth. And there the word confused, Babel in Hebrew means confuse. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. So there we have it. So this happens in the kind of the part in the book of Genesis, which is just after the flood, and the inhabitants of Noah have covered the earth, and or at least they've spread out over a large area. And it's immediately before God calls Abraham. So it's before that central story of scripture kind of kicks off in Genesis 12. And it's a really, really interesting story. And I know, Daniel, it's one of your favorites as well. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about it and to sort of see what it has to say to us today, because I think it probably does. So I think the first thing to see here is that the earth has one language. So there's this sort of sense in which there is a sort of harmony between the races of the earth, or at least, maybe there's one race in this. I'm not really sure, but certainly people can communicate with one another. And then what they do is they say, we want to make bricks, burn them thoroughly, and then build this city and this tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered upon the face of the whole earth. So there's this kind of, I guess the interesting question, Daniel, is how you understand what this tower represents, right? So it's got its top in the heavens. So there's a sense in which they're trying to there's a utopian sense, isn't there? That they're trying to create some kind of utopia, something that will replace God, something that will replace religion. And also then the interesting thing it says is, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. So something that will protect them as well. So, and also, let us make a name for ourselves. So something that will make us great. So
that names are very important, aren't they? In the scripture, naming and names are more than just labels. There's a significance to that, isn't there?
Yeah. So the tower, so it's interesting, isn't it? So I'll throw a couple of things out here. I've heard Jordan Peterson's lecture on this, and he talks about the way, very, very interesting insight, I think, is that the tower, and my insight, if indeed it is an insight, slightly different, which I'll give you in a minute. But Peterson basically says the situation here is that the utopian idea is that we're sort of gather everyone together, and through that process of unification bring about a utopian society. But the problem with that is that the more people you have in a group, the less easy it is to care for each individual and to see them as individuals. So in the smallest kind of societal or social group, which is, say, the nuclear family, everyone has a sort of very, very special and exalted role. You know, I've got 3 kids, can't do without any of them, pay them extensive attention all the time, etc., etc. And then, you know, the groups can get a little bit bigger, and you can still pay attention to individuals in them.
Yeah.
But really, once a group gets to about 200 or more, you can't really kind of have any kind of well, it gets harder and harder to have any sort of profound connection to the individuals in that group. So anyway, if you extrapolate that up to a society with hundreds of thousands or millions or tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of people, then individuals increasingly get thought of as just numbers or statistics. Incidentally, just going back to what we were saying earlier, the thing about We by Yevgeny Zemyatin, that's exactly what that book is about. It's this kind of demonic inversion of the image of the body of Christ in 1 Corinthians 12 with St. Paul, because the society is seen as a body, but the individuals are seen as individual cells that can just be eliminated. So that's what happens when you get this kind of utopian project. And actually, Peterson relates it to the European utopian project, and all the kinds of problems that happen when you try and sort of stick all these countries with tens of millions of people together and sort of start treating them like they're just statistics rather than individual cultures. So what happens there is you end up with a breakdown of language. So that's what Peterson says. So you started with one language, and then you end up with lots and lots of different language and an inability to communicate across these utopian societies, these aspirationally utopian societies. So breakdown in communication. And then again, somebody asked an interesting question in the lecture about the US, and Peterson actually said, well, he thinks this is a really good example of this, because in the US you do have lots of people. I think there are like 200 million people who live in the US. So you've got lots of people who live in the US, and you have people speaking different languages. I mean, literally speaking different languages, English and Spanish, and, you know, any other languages that might be spoken. But in a political sense as well, the left and the right, the polarization and the inability to communicate there. So that's kind of an interesting idea, that this is a kind of utopianism that this tower represents. So
I was going to sort of pick up on that, because I think what you're saying is what Peterson is picking up is that we can look at the Tower of Babel as a pattern of the way that things are or can become chaotic.
Yes.
And maybe we can find hope in that, because this is saying that someone or a group might try and implement, you know, the creation of a super state, or a kind of, you know, a massive human organism of a corporatization, a sort of a Google, Facebook, a Chinese CCP, a European Union, even an American states, but God has somehow designed the universe so that those follies will struggle. They will come to breaking points.
Yeah.
And so I kind of get quite. I feel the story is actually a very hopeful one. It's a good news one.
Yeah.
You know, it says that, you know, at the moment we might feel concerned about a whole range of things post-COVID, and there's all sorts of rumors of, like, the Klaus Schwab. If I pronounce that right, Klaus Schwab.
Yeah.
Great reset, you know, where you'll own nothing, blah blah blah. But we can also take hope that God has designed the universe in such a way that those projects can only but fail in the long term.
Yes.
Because unlike Eden, now I had the wonderful experience a couple of days ago of having some time with the iconographer, the Canadian YouTuber Jonathan Pajot, you know, who's described Eden as a mountain.
Yeah.
Eden is a cosmic mountain full of, you know, grace and spiritual adventure, with the tree of life, Christ at the top. You know, that is a structure which is indomitable, whereas Babel is a failed attempt at creating Eden. When I was doing computer science back in the 1980s, we had to read this book called The Mythical Man. I did a lot of systems analysis stuff and organizational studies and systems bits and bobs, because it was one of the things that I could actually get my brain round, where the more computational members of the faculty were and students were had that sort of geek brain and could deal with stuff that I couldn't even get my head around. But I could do the wider, bigger picture stuff. And the Mythical Man Month says essentially there's good studies to show the more you throw at a system, the bigger you try to throw at a system, the slower and sluggish it gets. And so beyond certain numbers, like you're saying, 200 or 30, there's certain quantums. If the more you throw at, and you think, oh yeah, this will make it better. This union, this European Union, will be better if we can shove more countries in it. And actually, what happens is it's like driving cars through mud. It just gets worse and worse and worse. Though, of course, you still have with the Babel story the sense that the horror of it, don't you? And the horror of the project and the attempt to reach to reach heaven, to do something almost blasphemous. It's sort of, do you not think it's picked up a bit in the book of Revelation as well? With the sort of total tyrannies, the numbers of the beast, the kind of new Babylon. There's a bit of that going on there as well, isn't there? The idea of an all-controlling system, and that it would be really difficult as a citizen in that place to be able to negotiate your way around that, to live off grid, like the early church was, or to live underground. This would be kind of terrifying. But the good news is God has designed the systems that even a total system will by its nature collapse.
I think that's exactly right. And I think also, so there are some really interesting things to pick up on there. What did you just say a minute ago? You just asked me a question, and I thought.
Don't ask me that. I'm getting outsourced. I remember what I did 10 seconds.
I'm just trying. I just had a thought about it, but then that's popped out of my head. Well, I'll say another thing I was thinking of saying anyway. Basically what it is I think it represents a kind of comprehensive attempt on the part of humanity to master reality in whatever way. And this, you can try and master reality in all sorts of ways. Politically, you can do it epistemologically, to believe that you can know everything. You could do it. You can do it sociologically, and you can do it in all sorts of ways. But I think that that is essentially what this tower represents, this attempt to master reality completely. And ultimately what it is a denial of our status as creatures, as mortal, as fallible, as vulnerable, and so on. And this is, in some ways, it's like the primal sin of the Garden of Eden. If you eat that fruit, you will become like God. And if you eat it, you won't die. So I think that in many ways that's what all sin is. It's this kind of refusal to actually accept our status as creatures, and to try and be like God in some way. Which is why my reading of it, which I think Peter's reading is excellent, and there are other ways to read it as well. But the interesting thing for me is this thing about lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. The tower, in this sense, represents protection. And so I think you can read this story as technology, which we develop, which will then protect us, and it will give us a kind of godlike status. And the link I see with the COVID thing is to do with medical science, is that all we need to do in order to protect ourselves from, well, first of all, we can do things like we can have these measures which we imagine will do something and protect us. I mean, of course, we know that they're very, very ineffective, but people believe that. They believe that they can master the virus. They believe they can change the way these viruses which are incredibly biologically sophisticated. They believe they can actually control that, and then we can eradicate it with a vaccine. And medical science is in a sense represented in this reading by the Tower of Babel. We just need this. We need this tower, and then we can go in it. We can go high up, and it will protect us, and we won't be scattered upon the face of the earth.
It's one of the things I was going to pick up actually on two things. One is isn't it strange how the collectivists, the communists, the sort of corporate giants are very much into this, aren't they? They're very much into this idea that we can conquer it all. It's
we can't live with it. We can't accept it as a facet of our lives.
Yeah, whether it's a virus or whatever problem that is put before, they sell themselves as the solution to. It's just within an arm's reach. A little bit more progress, and we'll be able to do that. As I said, a friend who grew up in the Soviet Union said, he remembers hearing teachers, really screaming at them, saying, "One day, comrades, we will control the weather.
Yes.
We will master the seemingly impossible." Now, you only actually have to know a little bit of the mathematics of some of these things, and it was one of the lucky perchance in my first degree. I looked a lot at these non-deterministic, chaotic systems. In fact, I did my whole dissertation on stuff like, how viruses spread, all of the mathematics and fractal growths and some of these things, and how economies work and so on. It's all kind of a very, very particular branch of mathematics. And you just cannot do this. Chaotic systems do not play ball. They are not. It's funny, a lot of biologists are very mechanicalistic in their view of mathematical systems. You cannot, just as you cannot predict the weather beyond a few weeks, you cannot make predictions about viral spreads beyond a similar frame of reference, similar window. It goes from being able to predict a few things in a few weeks to zillions within a month. And the idea that you can control and control out any unpredictabilities, any butterfly effects from, say, in case of the virus, 3 complex systems interacting together, which is the human body, the total human ecology, and the virus. All 3 of which are in constant flux.
And of course,
It's crazy.
And human psychology and the sociological factors.
And then you put in the economy, all these complex systems, and say, oh, well, we can just number crunch our way out of this. There's a vanity to that.
Yes, there's a hubris.
That's very, very dangerous, actually.
And the whole point being, of course, that if we acknowledge our status as creatures of the Creator, then we involve the Creator in the way that we think about society and we think about human life, and we don't just act like there isn't a God and we can just become God ourselves. And it's interesting what you say about the sort of hopeful aspect of this, because quite clearly in this story, it's a failure, and there's a communication breakdown which is brought about by God, and the project fails. And it reminds me of something I was reading in the Eastern Orthodox theologian Vladimir Lossky recently, which is that in the Orthodox tradition, they very much see death. They pick up on in the book of Genesis, the fall, lest he take hold of the tree of life and live forever, would send him out of the garden. So the point there is that death is a limitation to the capability of human sin. If human beings live forever, there would be no end to the sin that we can carry out. And it's a similar thing here, I think. If we had one language and excellent communication, and we were able to bring about these utopian projects, that's not good. That's not a good thing. And you can see what happens with the Soviet Union, or with the Nazification of parts of Europe and other utopian projects.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
They turn into hell on earth.
Isn't it interesting that in those collectives that are supposedly egalitarian and democratic in their own fashion, that often they have to have the strong man,
yes,
who forms a sort of who not only has that kind of politburo of elites around them, but also tends to pass power down family lines.
Yes,
that in itself, I think, is very telling about collectives, that they try to, like in North Korea, there's a sort of sense to try to immortalize the Kim family.
Yes.
Down the generations.
Yeah, and to deify them as well. I mean, they're like God.
Which of course is the ultimate horror,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And then, so just to bring this smack bang up to date, David, somebody sent me a document from the government this week called the Human Augmentation Strategic Implications Project, which is from the Ministry of Defense. And you've got your copy there. I've got my copy on my screen. So this is
reading.
This is bedtime. I mean, everyone's going to get a copy soon, presumably, because it's so interesting. But this is basically something coming out from the Ministry of Defense talking about human augmentation. Now, this has, as far as I can tell, this is a military thing, but it's also apparently got very great implications for wider society as well. So human augmentation, I mean, what are they talking about here? I guess what they're talking about is sort of permanently altering the human body in order to enhance it in various different ways, enhance our intelligence, enhance our ability to go without sleep, to not need the same kind of nutrition, to be faster, to be stronger, and so on and so forth. And I guess in some ways it's like an inversion of what it is to build a robot, isn't it? With a robot, you start from nothing. You build it up, and then you try and gradually make it more and more like a human, in the sense that human beings have these abilities, like the ability to make decisions and things like that. It's like the kind of other way around, because you start with all the benefits of being a human. So human beings are really good decision makers. We're really good at reacting to things as they happen, all kinds of things that robots can't really do very well. But then you make the human more robotic. And so, I mean,
again, it was chilling for me, because when I did this IT degree in the 80s, sorry to bore you all about it, but initially what attracted me in the University of Kent prospectus, it was called Computing and Cybernetics.
Yeah.
And I thought, that sounds really a bit Terminator. This sounds fun.
Yeah.
Let's sign up for this. And then they changed the name to Computer Systems Engineering, which actually sounded quite dull, really.
Yeah.
And largely was.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that's what it was. And it also reminded me of that great trope in the scriptures in Genesis, also in Genesis 6, where the sons of men, isn't it? Are the women in the scriptures. It says that the angels have sex with women.
Yeah.
And then there's the creation of this sort of hybrid human.
Oh yeah, the Nephilim.
Nephilim.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a chilling story. And it's after that God resets everything. The floodwaters come in, and I think it was a Jordan Peterson or Jonathan Pageau explanation of it. Was, why did God destroy the world at that point? Why did the floods come in? Well, when we cease to become human, we become irredeemable.
Yes.
I mean, did you know Richard Dawkins has, in a not so recent interview, said that he predicts at the end of the 21st century, humans will have been, out evolved, and what will be around will be largely Sims.
Right.
not with any consciousness, but sims. Yeah, so aliens will come around and there'll be little facsimiles, sort of trotting around. And he thought that was progress.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be. The thing is about Richard Dawkins is he's a man who's somehow become famous as an intellectual, but he has a complete inability to actually use any sort of critical faculty in terms of applying reason. I mean, I heard an interview recently with Freddie Sayers with Dawkins, who, on the one hand, he was saying that science, any meaningful question has to be a scientific one, basically, or any meaningful question can only be answered by science. And then later in the interview, he was talking about the way that it was a moral duty for people to have a vaccine. I mean, this, he's a man who has no capacity for philosophical reasoning whatsoever. And, the idea that, I mean, that's another example, isn't it? How can you even say it's progress? That's not a scientific judgment, is it? Science can't tell you what constitutes progress. It's a value judgment, isn't it? And that comes into this as well. So, like, when they're talking about ethical considerations, I mean, honestly, you've got to wonder what sort of robotic bureaucrat wrote this. The core tenets. So they're talking about, what are the kind of moral questions that this raises up? No mention of God, by the way, in this document. No mention of being created in the image of God or anything like that. The core tenets of morality are universal, according to this, but interpretation varies across cultures. Adopting human augmentation will therefore be uneven, and we should be prepared for allies and adversaries to exploit human augmentation in different ways.
I think, just as you read this, we need to have some background music.
Yeah. What kind of music? Are you going to find something?
Yeah, I've got some here. Hang on a sec.
Go on. This is probably a first for the podcast. Oh, here we go.
I just thought I'd put the Terminator on.
Yeah, brilliant. I love the Terminator theme tune and the Terminator films. Well, the first two. The last ones are rubbish. But anyway, so keep it going. Ethical perspectives are changing faster and more radically as a result of growing access to information. Defense cannot wait for ethical views to change before exploiting human augmentation. It must join the conversation now to ensure it is at the leading edge of the field. You've got to say, if this is the kind of document that defense is going to produce, it's not going to be taken very seriously in this.
I've said, hasta la vista, baby. I mean, it's full of bizarre stuff, isn't it? And there's one bit I noticed. I've only got it to about 10 pages on it, but
it's so boring. Honestly, it's so boring.
Where it says, when this is not yet in the realms of science fiction. Don't panic, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Even though we've given this the title, "The Dawn of a New Paradigm." Yeah. We've called this "Everything Will Change," and we're up shit creek. But don't worry, it's not science fiction.
It's really gonna. I mean, the thing about this ethics thing, and this is again, this comes back to this kind of complete and total philosophical incoherence. What is the point in writing a document, part of which is about ethics, when you've already decided the ethical outcome, or rather you've already decided the outcome, right, which is that you want to have this human augmentation technology, and what you need to do is you need to use ethics needs to catch up with you, right? So defense cannot wait for ethical views to change before exploiting human augmentation. It cannot wait. Safety versus potential benefit is the critical factor for employing human augmentation, not human dignity or our status as creatures before a creator. This equation is more complex in a military context, where the causal link between safety and risk must also consider the adversary and operational context. Defense must engage early and regularly with human augmentation development to ensure that these unique ethical factors are considered. Blah blah blah.
In other words, the British, German human augmented participants will make you a nice cup of tea before they kill you, whereas the Russian ones won't.
Listen, Daniel, listen to some of this, right? This is on the society one, right?
What page?
This is on page 64. This is really good.
You do it in a Dalek voice.
No, I do this one. Human augmentation will lead to major changes in health and social care, with notable improvements in preventative healthcare likely. In the future, anyone with the right knowledge and tools could indulge in DIY human augmentation, including modifying their own DNA. Balancing the rights of the individual with protecting society will be a complex dilemma for regulators. So you're going to have this situation where you're going to have some kind of regulation body to stop people from... Is
that like I got bit by a radioactive spider?
Manipulating their own DNA and becoming a threat to society.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Oh my goodness. Society will become more diverse as people use human augmentation to express their individuality. Human augmentation will lead to new forms of crime that will require law enforcers to develop new capabilities like RoboCop and Judge Dredd. Oh my goodness. I bet the person who wrote this, honestly, I bet the person who wrote this was paid a huge... I could have written this, Daniel. I've got loads of degrees. I could have written this, honestly. I could have written this and I would have been paid. Honestly, I'm in the wrong business. Yeah, this is a fantastic document. Whoever wrote it is a genius. I don't want to be I mean, are we being too dismissive of this project, Daniel? I mean, human augmentation. It's it's going to be really important, isn't it?
Or you're going to be able to 3D print bits of yourself. You're
going to be able to 3D print hearts in your garage and sell them at the car boot sale. It's all going to happen. This is tomorrow's world today. I mean, the thing is, Daniel, about this whole thing, right? Is I just it's just so stupid, isn't it? I mean, in some ways, when I first read this, I thought, oh man, this is awful. Like the British government are just absolutely losing the plot. They've got no sort of moral or ethical or philosophical or theological sense of anything. They're just, now they want to manipulate, use human being. You've got to think of the human being as a platform and use the brain as an interface for, blah, blah, blah. I mean, who cares? This is just insane.
When I was reading this afternoon, I thought there are times when I wonder if there's another planet I could go to that might be just, not going to have take this as a serious,
I think it's called Florida, isn't it? I think that's what we need to do. We all need to go to Florida, where they're probably not planning this kind of stuff. So anyway, it's a bit crazy. This is, and then it totally ties in with what we've been talking about, isn't it? The Tower of Babel thing. Is you think this is whatever this is madness, and you're not consulting God, you're not consulting His word, you're not consulting the truth that's been revealed to us about humanity, and if you want to consider the human being as a platform and the brain as an interface, you're working with a fundamentally false anthropology. And it is going to be, I mean, have these people never read Frankenstein? Have you never seen Jurassic Park? Literally all you need to do is just go and watch Jurassic Park and just think about this. There's no mention of Jurassic Park in this document, as far as I know. I mean, I only read about half of it and I skimmed it because, to be honest, it's very, very boring. Most of it is just, blah, 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 diagrams, little arrows pointing microchips and, all sorts of stuff. But anyway, Daniel, did
you know that you were performing? Actually, I think we might have to report you.
What have I done?
You just applied a psychological augmentation in the form of a cognitive enhancing substance.
Right.
These can include ranging from caffeine, nicotine, and herbal supplements.
Herbal tea, green tea. Yeah.
So other parts of the world will send in killer exoskeleton creatures, and we'll have herbal tea.
Who speak in an Austrian accent. I mean, no. I mean, all seriousness, there are some stuff about vaccines in this, isn't there? About how vaccines are now considered to be human augmentation development technologies because they basically, these new vaccines, I think they're really gene therapy, aren't they? They manipulate.
That's right.
genes.
It's all part of the human machine teaming.
Right. Well, look, listen to me, Daniel. I'm putting a stake in the ground, right? Forget vaccines. I'm not being augmented, all right? I don't care. You can other me. You can stop me from traveling. You can call me an anti-augmenter, all you like. But it's not going to happen because my brain is not an interface. Thank you very much. If it is an interface, it's an interface between my soul and my body. But I'm not sure about that theologically.
If I put a plug here for an interesting book that's come out a few months ago, Alexandria by Paul Kingsnorth.
Oh, right.
Tries to project what this might look like, several centuries down the line, where those who've decided not to be augmented or uploaded into Alexandria, which is a sort of mainframe that exists in London, where hundreds of millions of consciousnesses are. The rest of the British population live in one small village in the Fens, basically spearing and shooting things and living around fires, while drones go around trying to suggest to them, would you like your consciousness, do you really want to live like this, or would you like your conscience uploaded? It's actually a very good novel. I'd highly recommend it.
Is it called Alexandria?
Alexandria by Paul Kingsnorth.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. I'm writing that down.
He's just become a Christian.
Oh,
right. He's gone from being a sort of eco-warrior, Wicca kind of person to having been baptized in Ireland, I think by a Romanian Orthodox community.
Oh wow, fantastic!
And he's a really interesting guy. So
my
calls himself a recovering environmentalist. though actually, but interestingly enough, he says he's actually living the environmental dream because he's running a farm.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's the thing, Daniel. Is we Christians, we are the true environmentalists because we have a coherent view of what the environment actually is, which is that it's created by God and that we are the stewards of it as human beings. But what I was going to say is, have you ever watched? I think so. There are two of these films. There's Escape from LA and there's Escape from New York, starring Kurt Russell. And at the end,
cult films.
Yeah, John Carpenter, I think. At the end of one of them, he turns off all the electricity in all the world, and that has come back to me quite a few times over these days, because I think the thing about all this AI, right, and this is something I was actually having a conversation with Carbon Mike, who's this guy you may have heard of.
Yes, I have,
that I'll release that on our podcast at some point. But he was saying, with this AI stuff, you can do loads of stuff, but at the end of the day, you can just unplug. Someone could just come along and unplug this thing, right? Because it can't plug itself in. And you can always unplug it, So there is a fundamental flaw to this whole idea, is that, that technology is always dependent upon humans in some way, So
one big solar flare, and
and it's over. Someone comes along and works out how to shut the electricity down. It's over. Pandemic over. Response over. Vaccine rollout over. All of it is dependent upon electricity, isn't it? I mean, if Kurt Russell came along now and shut off the electricity, it would fundamentally change everything. So there's a sort of a weakness, there's a flaw in all of this stuff. And actually, all this stuff with the Great Reset and stuff, I mean, I do find it worrying in lots of ways. But the actual project itself, like if you actually read the book, I've read most of it. I mean, to be honest, it's so boring and repetitive, you can't really read all of it. But you'd never be able to do it. It's just unfeasible to have like a database of absolutely everyone in the world and be able to control everything they did. It just is unfeasible. It could not happen. Anyway, Daniel, should we do an email? Because I've got a good email here. I'm going to make this the email of the week because it's very imaginative. Right. So this is from Malcolm. So thanks for this, Malcolm. Dear sirs, thank you very much for your entertaining and thought-provoking podcast. I look forward to it each Friday morning. Well, you're very welcome. It's very nice to hear that, Malcolm. Earlier this year, attempting to understand the inspiration behind the more outlandish pronouncements of the woke, I defined for myself a new word. Are you ready for this, Daniel? The new word is dogmatifact. Dogmatifact. Dogmatifact is defined as a category of fact, statement, argument, or belief articulated as incontestable by the proponents of a particular dogma that is 1, preposterous to anyone not aligned to the dogma, 2, contrary to established fact, 3, rarely, if ever, supported by empirical evidence or heterodox reason, and often claimed as founded on lived experience, 4, designed, at least in part, to confuse and or antagonize those not aligned to the dogma, 5, celebrated by its proponents as inherently virtuous, 6, unstable and ultimately ephemeral, 7, not a fact in fact, but 8, a fiction. I realise the same definition can be applied with a very few modifications to the routine pronouncements of the government in relation to COVID. This is perhaps not surprising, given that those advising the government are deeply embedded within the university system or the civil servants, institutions in which the culture of presenting fictions as facts prevails, and from which most woke dogmatifacts emerge. What is different, surprising and disturbing is that while these words are quite hard to pronounce. Whilst woke dogmatifacts are generally ignored or taken with a pinch of salt by the vast majority of the general public, COVID dogma has been so widely imbibed by the culture that COVID dogmatifacts are understood as facts by the general public. I remain hopeful, however, that ultimately the government's COVID dogmatifacts will be revealed as such, and that the public will realise that what they were told were not facts, in fact, but fiction. Yours, Malcolm. Yeah, good. I mean, the thing about this is that, I mean, I don't know about all 8 of the, I mean, it's quite a specifically defined word, but there is this kind of thing with dogmatifacts, if I may start using that, where, especially around certain scientific things, where you're sort of not supposed to question them, and you're not supposed to not believe them, like it's some kind of moral thing. I think this thing with anthropogenic climate change, I've never seen anything that convinces me that this is actually a real thing. I've just been told that you must believe it. You know, I heard that, was that Australian comedian, what's his name? Is it Steve Jenkins saying, I don't believe it. And then his interlocutor says, well, you've got to believe it. It's against the law. No, it's not. Well, it should be, like that kind of thing. You have to believe it. It's the law to believe in climate change. You must, but why? I mean, give me some reasons to believe that it's true, and then I'll evaluate them, and then I'll come to my own decision. What's with this pressure all the time, particularly about climate change? I mean, there are other things as well. But I mean, do you get that, Daniel? Do you get that?
I'm just wondering how you spell it, because we could maybe start a hashtag.
Dogmatifact. Well, it's just the word dogma with TI and then fact. So it's like kind of artifact and
dogmatifact.
Yeah. But you know what I mean about that kind of thing. It's like
started with a hashtag. So.
Yeah, very good. We'll hashtag it out. Dogmatifact. I've written it down as well. But why is this that in science, of all places, you get this thing where you have to believe it? It's like, well, show me the evidence, and then we'll talk about what is this kind of this group think that. I mean, you're more of a sciencey person than me.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I think, science in the end, as much as they might shy away from it because they'd rather be augmented, is made up of human beings, and human beings are fallen, and we like groupthink, don't we? We like to other people. That makes us feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
So we create enclaves of truth. We create heresies. I think, the last couple of years, I've become aware that the nicey sort of sandal version of scientific community, where, I mean, years ago, before I became a minister, I thought it'd be really good to be an astronomer, wouldn't it? Because there'd be all these kind of hip folks, and you could just sort of sit all through the night with a laptop looking at the stars, in some really interesting location, and maybe discover a planet or two, and it'd all be kind of really relaxed and stuff. And the reality is of it, it's sort of cutthroat business. And the same with the scientific world. I think folks don't realise actually how many how much sort of predatory behaviour there is towards ideas. And if somebody comes out with something that's maybe kind of commercially challenging, that they're going to get eaten alive. But you sort of think, there's full of these really nice, calm, rational, collective. It's not so they're just like you and I.
The paradigmatic example of this surely is to do with the pharmaceutical industry, isn't it? Which is a huge industry, billion-dollar industry. So they don't want research which is going to show that their products are unsafe or that they're unnecessary or that there are alternatives, right? So you get this kind of consensus which is protected by the people who have the vested interests, right? So the pharmaceutical industry starts to invest in universities, in individual academics and their funding in hospitals and so on. And so they start to exert control. But the funny thing is it takes on this kind of this moral character where it's not just that you're wrong, it's that you're actually bad for saying it. So there's this kind of carapace which covers it, which is a kind of false virtuosity, which particularly does pertain, I think, in the sciences, and as you say, because people have vested interest in what's going on. And perhaps that's why you don't get the same kind of thing in the humanities as much. I did, I've done degrees in literature and philosophy, and you don't get the same kind of, there's not the same kind of vested interest in Herman Melville. People think that Moby Dick is a great book, but they're not going to start, lobbying corporations and governments and stuff to make sure that his reputation is maintained, because they want to sell billions of copies of Moby Dick every year. So maybe that's why. Maybe we've solved it, Daniel. Maybe that's why the sciences are so. But then there's the irony, isn't it? Because then the science, we always talk, scientific, especially in the last 18 months, scientific consensus, science is pure, science is untainted, science is free from any kind of vested interests, it's totally objective, blah, blah, blah. It's not objective. It's probably more corrupt than almost any other area of human industry. So
where the money is, often there is the corruption, isn't there? One example that comes to mind in recent history has been the sort of development of pesticides. Which you can see all sorts of benefits for, but a generation or two down the line, because now the discussion is very different. It's about their destructive behaviour. It's about what that's happened to the food chain, how that's augmented us, and what that's done to the local ecology. Is that in our foods and so on and so on and so on. And so that whole narrative that I suspect by the 50, 60 years ago was very different. These were seen as great advances. People are holding back, are pulling back a bit and saying, maybe we shouldn't be using this so aggressively.
And then the other interesting thing about this is where he talks about lived experience, which I think is a different aspect, isn't it? But this does actually relate to a news story this week, because we've got this let me be careful that I get the terminology right, this trans woman who has been authorized to compete in the women's weightlifting at the Tokyo Olympics. So somebody who is born a man, who is biologically male in terms of strength of her shoulders and arms and muscles and everything, and essentially has the physiological makeup of a man, is now allowed to compete with women who are, you know, as a biological fact, on average, weaker than men, substantially weaker, especially when it comes to weightlifting, because weightlifting is, you know, everything is augmented. There's that word again. Everything is more extreme when it comes to weightlifting. So the record, I don't actually know the record for women, but the record for a deadlift for a man is which is where you lift a heavy barbell off the floor, and you straighten your legs and your back, is almost half a ton. For a woman, it's far smaller. I can't actually remember what it is, but it's a fraction of that. You consider how strong men can actually get when they do weightlifting. It's actually very frightening. But anyway, the point there is that there's also this kind of Gnostic element to the sort of dogmatic fact, isn't there? Which is that, well, if I feel that something is a reality, then it must be a reality. So if I feel that although I am biologically male, and, you know, everything about me from a physiological perspective is male, nevertheless, if I have a kind of psychological or ephemeral sense that I'm a female, then that's actually more important than the biological reality, which is interesting considering what we were just talking about, because we were just talking about this ostensible claim to be able to understand the world objectively through science. Right, that's reality. Science is reality, which is, you know, the kind of thing Dawkins comes out with. But then what about this then? What about this, which is completely nothing to do with science, really, is it? And I think you'd be justified in saying it's contrary to science. So what's going on there, Daniel? Because it's contradictory, isn't it?
Well, it's such a big subject, isn't it? And clearly we've been on this path philosophically. I suspect because we've been blind in many ways to, you know, the old philosophical truths and ways.
Yeah.
And that we've lost track as a culture of how to speak philosophically as a common way of doing things, you know. And so the idea that I can be something that I'm not, which, you know, maybe a generation or two would have been pulled apart, is now tolerated.
Yes,
because we don't have that philosophical language. You know, maybe it's also, you know, it's older ways of teaching that you know, I was brought up in the sort of 1970s style, throw everything out, you know, throw out grammar, throw out the 3 R's, and just sort of learn what you want, kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know, that was my sort of British primary schooling, was along those lines. You know, if it doesn't feel right, then don't learn it. You know, don't do it. And if you invest in that, and if you got generations, my generation, the generation before that, have come with that to the fore, then I'm not surprised that we get to this.
Yeah.
By lived experience. Didn't Plato say that experience is the mother of all liars? Maybe I'm misquoting him. But I know Plato's a bit like Churchill, isn't it?
It's a very Platonic thing to say. Yeah. When you consider the allegory of the cave, where it's the appearance which is deceptive, and the reality is something that you have to sort of discover through philosophical enlightenment, isn't it? So for Plato, appearance was deceiving because it didn't give you access to the truth about reality, which is ultimately found in the realm of the forms. But anyway, I think we better wrap things up there, Daniel. It's a good, I think it's been an interesting episode because we've covered sort of slightly different stuff to what we would normally do.
You might say we have to terminate.
Yeah, exactly. So just some quick notices. So if you want to join our Patreon community, that'd be great. It's a sort of online community where you pay a fee, but then you get to join with us and support the show and things. We've actually brought the monthly fee down now to £1.50 a month. So £1.50 plus VAT, which is 20%. So it's a total bargain. So hopefully £1.50. So we're talking like £2 a month basically in total. So if you'd like to join, you can do it for as low as that amount. We've also got Odyssey channel now. So if we disappear from YouTube, we're on Odyssey. Okay, so come to Odyssey, ODYSE.com. Find us there. We're on Odyssey. All our videos are there. You can find us there. Sermon audio, we put sermons up every week for spiritual nourishment. That's at irreverentsermonaudio.buzzsprout.com. Daniel's putting one up this week. Daniel's always very, very good and popular, I must say as well. They always perform well. And then you can email us, irreverentpod@gmail.com, and follow us on Twitter @irreverentpod. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, we have a Telegram channel as well. Join our Telegram channel. Just search for us on Telegram. And you're on Telegram, aren't you, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
We're more with it than the Ministry of Defence.
Yes, indeed. I think we're way cooler in so many ways than the Military of Defence, honestly. Yeah, great. Okay, well, Daniel, thanks so much for the chat. I've really enjoyed this one. I feel like we're really lighthearted.
I think they're going to have an interesting title for this.
Yeah, we need somebody to come up.
The dawn of a new paradigm.
Yeah, let's hope not. All right, Daniel. Right, God bless you, all our listeners, and we look forward to being with you again next week.
Hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista.